A glimpse through the lens, the rain started as a gentle patter, but quickly transformed into a downpour as Farah huddled beneath the gallery's minimalist awning. Water streamed from her portfolio case despite her best efforts to shield it with her body. The rejection letter from Meridian Gallery's submission office felt like lead in her pocket. Her photographs hadn't even made it past the initial review. "They're not accepting new artists at this time," the receptionist had explained with practiced sympathy. The same words Farah had read in countless emails. She checked her watch. 2 hours before her catering shift began, but nowhere to go in this deluge. The cafe where she worked mornings was 20 blocks away, and her soaked clothes guaranteed a miserable walk. "Excuse me, are you planning to stand there all afternoon?"
Yes.
Farah turned to find a tall man with sultan pepper hair regarding her. With curiosity, his expensive coat and the way he carried himself screamed, "Belongs here in a way Farah never would." "I'm waiting for the rain to stop," she answered, clutching her portfolio tighter. The man glanced at the black case. "Photographer, trying to be. May I?" He gestured toward her portfolio. Farah hesitated. She'd had her work dismissed enough. For one day, but something in his expression, genuine interest without condescension, made her relent. "They're a bit damp," she warned. Carefully opening the case, the man studied each photograph in silence, his expression unreadable. Farah braced herself for the usual platitudes. "You have an exceptional eye," he said finally, "particularly for finding dignity in difficult circumstances." Farah blinked, caught off guard by this specific observation. "I'm Julian Mercer." He extended his hand. The name hit her like a physical force. Julian Mercer, founder of Meridian Gallery, and one of the most influential figures in the contemporary art world. The very person whose staff had rejected her work hours earlier. "Farah Nasser," she managed, shaking his hand. "Your work deserves to be seen, Ms. Nasser. Would you be interested in discussing it further? I have an office upstairs." Could respond, her phone buzzed a text from the catering company, asking if she could arrive early to help with setup. "Actually, I'm working here tonight," she said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. As part of the catering staff, something flickered across Julian's face. Not pity, but recognition. "The fundraiser," he nodded. "All the more reason we should talk. Come up to the 3rd floor when your shift ends. My office is at the end of the hall." Farah spent her catering shift in a daze, mechanically offering con-ops to gallery patrons, while stealing glances at Julian Mercer as he worked the room. He moved with easy confidence among collectors and artists, yet something about him seemed separate from the glittering crowd, as if he were observing rather than participating. At one point, her eyes met across the gallery, gave her a small nod, confirming their arrangement still stood. When her shift ended at 11 p.m., Farah changed from her server's uniform back into her still-damp clothes. She debated whether to go upstairs or simply leave. Successful people like Julian Mercer didn't waste time with struggling artists unless they wanted something. But what could he possibly want from her? Curiosity won. She found his office as Ilya, corner space with glass walls overlooking the city. "Ah, Farah," Julian looked up from his desk. "Please come in." The office was surprisingly modest, with bookshelves lining one wall and photographs, not paintings, covering another. Many depicted war zones and refugee camps. "These are Eliza Donohue's work," Farah recognized, momentarily forgetting her nervousness. From her Displaced series, Julian smiled. "You know her work?" "She's one of my inspirations," Farah admitted. "The way she captures humanity in inhospitable places, ... "That's precisely what I see in your photographs," Julian said, gesturing for her to sit. "No, your context is different. The essence is the same, finding beauty amid struggle." He opened a drawer and produced the portfolio she'd submitted. "That morning, your official submission didn't make it to me. Fortunately, I found it rather compelling that you were both applying and working at our event today." "Compelling or pathetic?" Farah asked wryly. "Determined," Julian corrected. "Tell me, what drives your photography?" "My grandfather says I've always tried to find the extraordinary in ordinary moments," she replied. "Growing up in our neighborhood, beauty wasn't obvious. You had to look for it." Julian studied her. "I'm working on a new project documenting community transformation in overlooked neighborhoods. Your perspective would be valuable. Would you be interested in contributing? Farah stared at him, waiting for the catch. What exactly would that involve? Initially photographing specific locations I'll identify? If your work fits the project's vision, it could lead to more substantial involvement and payment, Farah asked directly. It's accustomed to exposure, offers to dance around the subject. Julian named a figure that made her eyes widen. Location, he clarified. With additional compensation if we use your work in the final exhibition. Aid? It was more than she made in 2 weeks of double shifts. She asked, still suspicious. There are plenty of established photographers, because you see what they don't, Julian said simply. Your photographs show respect for your subjects that can't be taught. As Farah left the gallery with a contract to review and a first assignment, the rain had stopped. The city glistened under streetlights, transformed by the recent downpour, just as her prospects had been transformed by this unexpected encounter, yet something about the situation nagged at her. Why would someone like Julian Mercer take such interest in an unknown photographer? His reputation was impeccable, his gallery prestigious. What wasn't he telling her? Farah pushed the thought aside as she boarded the late-night bus. Whatever his motives, this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. She wouldn't let suspicion rob her of this chance, but she wouldn't be naive either. The weight of dreams, the steam from the espresso machine, fogged up Farah Nazar's glasses for the third time that morning. She wiped them quickly with her apron and returned to the line of impatient customers, each one blending into the next after 6 hours on her feet. At 25, Farah had mastered the art of the perfect latte while simultaneously calculating how many more shifts she needed to cover her grandfather's medication this month. 1 oat milk latte with an extra shot for Danielle, she called out with practiced cheerfulness that never quite reached her eyes. The morning rush at Brood Awakening was finally winding down when her manager, Trevor, approached. Hey Farah, can you stay until 3? Olivia called in sick again. Farah's shoulders dropped slightly. She had planned to use those precious afternoon hours to photograph the abandoned warehouse district for her portfolio, but saying no wasn't really an option. Not when her grandfather's pharmacy bills kept growing. Sure, no problem, she replied, already mentally rearranging her day. As the cafe quieted, Farah took a rare moment to check her phone. 3 rejection emails from galleries she'd submitted her photography to last month, each one politely explaining they weren't accepting new artists at this time, or that her work, while promising, wasn't quite what they were looking for. Bad news? Asked Zoe, her coworker, noticing Farah's expression. Just the usual, Farah shrugged, tucking her phone away. Apparently my unique perspective on urban decay and renewal isn't unique enough. Zoe squeezed her shoulder. There. Loss. You're crazy talented, Farah. Those photos you took of the old textile factory were incredible. Thanks, Farah smiled faintly. But incredible doesn't pay the bills. When her extended shift finally ended, Farah hurried home to the small apartment she shared with her grandfather, Samir. She found him where she usually did, sitting by the window working on his calligraphy. At 73, his hands weren't as steady as they once were, but he refused to give up the art that had sustained him through war, immigration, and the loss of his wife. How was work, Habibi? He asked, looking up with bright eyes that defied his frail frame. Busy, she answered, dropping her bag and placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. Did you take your medication? Yes, he waved dismissively. And I made fasulia for dinner. You need to eat more. The small apartment smelled wonderfully of the bean stew he'd prepared. Despite his health problems, Samir insisted on cooking. Whenever he could, it was his way of maintaining dignity, of contributing. How are your photographs coming along? He asked as they ate. Farah poked at her food. I'm still trying. Got some more rejections today. Samir nodded wisely. You know, your grandmother received 63 rejection letters before her first book was published. You've told me. Farah smiled. It was a story she'd heard countless times, but she never tired of it, because it matters, he insisted. Persistence matters. Talent without persistence is like a bird without wings. After dinner, while her grandfather dozed in front of the television, Farah retreated to their tiny bathroom, the only space she could convert into a dark room by covering the window and door cracks with towels. She developed the photos she'd taken last weekend, watching the images emerge from blank paper, an old man feeding pigeons with hands gnarled like tree roots, children playing in the spray of a broken fire hydrant, a young couple dancing beneath. The elevated train tracks. These stolen moments of beauty amid urban struggle were what she lived to capture. Tomorrow, she had decided she would visit Meridian Gallery's open submission day. It was a long shot. Meridian was the most prestigious contemporary art space in the city, but Farah had carefully selected her best work for one final attempt before reality forced her to shelve her dreams indefinitely as she hung the photos to dry. Her phone buzzed with a text from her second job. The catering company needed her for an event tomorrow evening, a private reception at Meridian Gallery. Farah stared at the message, strange feeling washing over her. Coincidence or fate? Either way, she'd get to see the inside of the gallery that had occupied her dreams for years, even if she was carrying trays instead of displaying her work. She accepted the shift and went to bed, setting her alarm an hour earlier than usual. She would submit her portfolio before her morning shift at the cafe, then head to the gallery event afterward. It would be an exhausting day, but Farah was used to those. What she wasn't used to was the spark of hope that refused to be extinguished, despite all evidence suggesting she should know better. Shadows and light. 3 weeks into her assignment for Julian Mercer, Farah found herself standing in an abandoned community center in Westridge, the city's most neglected district. The building's interior was a contradiction: crumbling ceilings and peeling paint alongside newly installed windows and fresh drywall in certain rooms. She photographed the contrast methodically, capturing how sunlight streamed through clean glass into spaces still bearing the scars of decades of neglect. Julian had given her a list of locations across the city with specific times to photograph them. Each shared this same pattern of decay and selective renewal. "You're not supposed to be in here," a voice called from behind. Farah turned to find a young woman regarding her suspiciously. "I'm working for Julian Mercer," Farah explained, lowering her camera, documenting the building. The woman's expression shifted. "You're the photographer? Huh, thought you'd be older." She extended her hand. "I'm Dominique Wells, community coordinator, Farah Nassar. What exactly is happening here?" Dominique gave her an odd look. "The restoration project," Julian explained. Before Farah could answer, her phone rang. Julian, as if summoned by their conversation. "I see you've met Dominique," he said when she answered. "Perfect timing. I'm outside." Minutes later, Julian joined them, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down rather than his usual tailored suits. He greeted Dominique warmly before turning to Farah. "I believe I owe you context," he acknowledged. "Would you join me for a walk?" Outside, they strolled through streets Farah would normally avoid after dark. Julian nodded to local residents who clearly recognized him. 5 years ago, my wife Alina launched a foundation to revitalize community spaces in underserved neighborhoods," he explained. "It's not gentrification, as a restoration that serves existing residents." "Your wife?" Farah asked, realizing she knew nothing about Julian's personal life. A shadow crossed his face. "Alina died 3 years ago. Cancer. This project was her passion." "I'm sorry," Farah said quietly. "The foundation continues her work," Julian continued after a moment. "We identify critical community infrastructure centers, clinics, libraries, and restore them. But we've faced challenges documenting impact. That's where you come in. Why not tell me this from the beginning?" Julian's pace slowed. "The foundation operates discreetly to avoid publicity that might drive property speculation. And frankly, I needed to ensure you'd photograph these places honestly, not through the lens of what you thought I wanted to see." They reached a small building with a freshly painted sign, "Alina Mercer Memorial Health Clinic." "This was our first project," Julian said. "Alina grew up in this neighborhood. She never forgot where she came from, even after her art career took off." Inside, the clinic was modest but immaculate. A wall displayed photographs of a striking woman with auburn hair and intense eyes. Alina at various project sites, always surrounded by community members. "She was a photographer too? Photojournalist before we met?" Julian confirmed. She documented humanitarian crises worldwide before focusing on domestic inequality. Farah studied the photographs, recognizing the same quality Julian had identified. In her own work, genuine connection with subjects. The exhibition you mentioned, Farah said slowly, it's about her legacy, isn't it? Julian nodded. The Foundation's 5th anniversary coincides with what would have been our 15th wedding anniversary. The exhibition will showcase the transformation of these spaces before, during, and after restoration. But why me? Must know dozens of professional photographers. Because your work reminds me of hers, Julian said simply. Not in style, but in essence. You both see people, not just subjects. As they left the clinic, Farah's perception of Julian shifted. Not a privileged gallery owner offering charity, but a man honoring his wife's legacy through meaningful action.
There's
Something else you should see, Julian said, leading her to a nondescript warehouse several blocks away. Inside was an art studio unlike any Farah had seen, spacious, well-equipped, and filled with young people working on various projects. Some painted, others sculpted or designed on computers. The Elena Mercer Arts Collective, Julian explained. Free studio space and mentorship for artists from underrepresented communities. A teenage boy approached them, proudly displaying a photograph of local shopkeepers. This is excellent, Dion, Julian said, examining the image. You've captured Mrs. Rivera perfectly. Farah watched Julian interact with the young artists, offering specific, thoughtful feedback to each. This wasn't performative philanthropy. He knew every student by name, understood their artistic vision. We've had some success stories, Julian told her as they toured the facility. 3 alumni have works in major collections now. But more importantly, every participant leaves with skills and connections they wouldn't otherwise have. As they walked back toward Meridian Gallery, where Farah had left her bicycle, the pieces began to align. Julian's interest in her work, the specific locations he'd assigned, his attention to overlooked communities, all formed part of a larger purpose she hadn't initially understood. I'd like you to consider an expanded role, Julian said as they reached the gallery. Not just documenting the buildings, but the people whose lives have been impacted. Their stories deserve to be told. Farah thought of her grandfather, of their neighborhood where resources were scarce but dignity abundant. She thought of her own struggles to be seen in the art world. I'd be honored, she said, but I have one condition. Julian raised an eyebrow. Want to learn about Elena, not just as your wife or a philanthropist, but as a photographer? If I'm helping continue her work, I should understand her vision. Julian was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, he finally said. It won't be easy for me, but it's the right approach. He extended his hand. Partners, then? As they shook hands, Farah felt the weight of responsibility settling alongside opportunity. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was becoming a mission she hadn't known she was seeking. The exhibition 4 months later, Farah stood in Meridian Gallery's main exhibition space, surrounded by her photographs. Large format images lined the walls, before and after shots of restored community spaces, alongside intimate portraits of the people who used them, a mother reading to her child in a renovated library, elderly men playing chess in a senior center, teenagers collaborating in the arts collective. What do you think? Julian asked, appearing beside her. It's surreal, Farah admitted. I never imagined my work in a space like this. Your work deserves to be here, Julian said firmly. The preview critics were impressed. The exhibition, titled Renewal, would open to the public the following evening. Already, several photographs had sold, with proceeds benefiting the Elena Mercer Foundation. There's something I'd like to discuss before tomorrow, Julian said, leading her to a quiet corner. The Harmon Prize Committee saw your portfolio. They're considering you for this year's Emerging Photographer Award. Era froze. The Harmon was the most prestigious photography award for new artists, launching careers overnight. That's impossible, she stammered. Hardly. Julian smiled. Your work speaks for itself, but there's a complication. The nomination requires a statement about your background, your journey as an artist. Farah's stomach tightened. You mean they want? My story, poor immigrant granddaughter makes good, the struggle narrative. They want authenticity, Julian corrected gently, "which you have in abundance." My work should stand on its own, Farah insisted. In an ideal world, yes, but context matters. What? Your perspective is shaped by your experiences. To a photograph she'd taken of her grandfather's hands, next to those of a young boy learning calligraphy at one of the community centers. Different generations, similar determination. I started taking photographs because beauty in our neighborhood wasn't obvious to outsiders, she said quietly. I wanted to prove it existed. Then that's your statement, Julian said. Not performative struggle, but truthful seeing. The conversation was interrupted by Zoe's arrival. Farah's former coworker had become her assistant, helping manage the increasing demands on Farah's time as the exhibition took shape. Your grandfather's here, Zoe announced. He's insisting on seeing the gallery before anyone else. Farah smiled. Of course he is. She found Samir examining her photographs with critical attention, using his walking cane to move slowly from image to image. What do you think, Jito? She asked. Good composition, he nodded. Strong use of light. But this one, he pointed. To a portrait of an elderly woman tending a community garden, this one has your mother's eye for dignity. Farah blinked back sudden tears. Her mother had died when Farah was 12. Leaving only memories and a handful of photographs she'd taken during her brief hobby in photography. You think so? I know so, Samir said firmly. She would be proud. Am I that evening, Farah sat in her apartment, no longer the tiny place she'd shared with her grandfather, but a modest 2-bedroom where they each had space, and Samir had a small room for his calligraphy. The advance from her exhibition sales had made the move possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominique. Community center students want to attend opening. Need 15 tickets? Another followed from Julian. Harmon committee needs statement by tomorrow. No pressure, but opportunity knocking. Farah set her phone aside and opened Elena's journal, one of several Julian had reluctantly shared. In it, Elena had written about the responsibility of photographers to their subjects, the ethical complexities of documenting others' lives. One passage particularly resonated. Access to others' stories is a privilege, not a right. What we choose to show and what we choose to keep, private, these decisions shape not just how viewers see our subjects, but how our subjects see themselves reflected in our work. Farah thought about her own journey from serving coffee to working in one of the city's most prestigious galleries, about the compromises and opportunities that had brought her here, about what she wanted her work to say. At midnight, she finally wrote her statement for the Harmon Prize. Not a story of triumph over adversity, but a reflection on seeing and being seen, on the responsibility of telling other stories, on finding beauty not despite difficult circumstances, but within them. She ended with words that echoed both Elena's philosophy and her grandfather's wisdom. Photography isn't about capturing reality as it is, but as it could be if only we took the time to truly see. The next morning, Farah arrived at the gallery early to find Julian already there, adjusting lighting on a newly hung photograph she didn't recognize. It was one of Elena's self-portrait, showing her reflected in a window, camera visible. The focus not on her, but on what she was seeing beyond the glass. I thought it belonged with the exhibition, Julian explained. A conversation between her work and yours. As final preparations for the opening continued around them, Farah faced the most challenging aspect of her new visibility. Reconciling the barista who had struggled to pay rent with the photographer, whose work now commanded respect. The two worlds felt impossible to bridge, yet here she stood in the middle. I submitted my statement, she told Julian, though I'm still not sure about this whole thing. Doubt is part of the process, he assured her. Elena used to say, if you're completely comfortable with your work, you're not pushing hard enough. When the gallery doors opened that evening, Farah was startled by the crowd, not just art world, elites, but residents from the neighborhoods she'd photographed. Julian had arranged buses to bring them, ensuring the subjects of Farah's work could see themselves represented on Meridian's prestigious walls as she moved through the exhibition. Hearing visitors' responses to her photographs, something settled. Within her, this wasn't about her rise from barista to artist. It was about creating a bridge between worlds that rarely intersected, bringing Westridge's reality into Meridian's rarefied space, and Meridian's resources back to Westridge by midnight. 8 photographs had sold to collectors, 3 major publications had requested interviews, and the Alina Mercer Foundation had received significant new donations. But the moment that mattered most came when Dion, the teenage photographer from the Arts Collective, approached her with eyes wide. "Your pictures make our neighborhood look the way it feels to live there," he said. "Not perfect, but worth seeing, worth caring about." In that moment, Farah understood what Julian had recognized in her work from the beginning, not just technical skill or artistic vision, but the capacity to see value where others saw only lack, to transform seeing into action. Full circle, 1 year after her exhibition opening, Farah stood in the renovated warehouse that now housed the NASA Mercer Visual Arts Center. The space hummed with activity students learning photography basics, community members documenting their neighborhood's evolution, professional photographers mentoring emerging talent. "Ms. Nasser, can you help me with this setting?" called Tiana, a 14-year-old whose natural eye for composition reminded Farah of herself at that age. Farah replied, setting down the grant proposal she'd been reviewing. Winning. The Harmon Prize had transformed Farah's career overnight. Museum acquisitions, commissions, and teaching offers had followed. But rather than leave behind the communities she'd documented, she'd partnered with Julian to expand the Alina Mercer Foundation's work. The Visual Arts Center was their newest initiative, providing equipment, training, and exhibition opportunities to residents who wanted to tell their own stories through photography. "The darkroom ventilation is acting up again," Dominique reported, now the center's full-time director. "And the printer needs calibration. Add it to the list for tomorrow," Farah sighed. "Right. The building inspector is coming at 10. Running the center alongside her burgeoning photography career was exhausting, but deeply satisfying. For every challenge, there was a moment that reaffirmed her purpose, like watching Samir teach Arabic calligraphy to neighborhood children. Creating art that incorporated their photographs, her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Flight landed. Heading to Foundation. First, then meeting you at center. Good news from London." Julian had been in England negotiating a traveling exhibition of the Renewal Project, aiming to inspire similar initiatives in other cities. Their professional partnership had evolved into something more personal over the past year of relationship. Built on shared values and complementary strengths, Farah still marveled at how differently things might have turned out had it not rained that day outside Meridian Gallery. Had Julian not noticed her portfolio? Had she not taken the risk of showing him her work? Later that afternoon, Julian arrived with Farah's grandfather in tow. They'd apparently run into each other at the Foundation office, where Samir now volunteered 3 days a week. "The Tate Modern wants the exhibition," Julian announced. "And they're offering a residency for you to document similar communities in London." Farah's students gathered around, aware that something important was happening. "Oh, that's amazing," she said, mind already racing with possibilities. "We could bring some of the students, make it an exchange program." Always thinking bigger, Julian smiled.
"No."
"That's what I told the Tate director. She's on board, provided we secure additional funding." "Harrison Foundation might be interested," Farah suggested. "Their new arts initiative aligns perfectly." They discussed logistics. Farah noticed Dion showing Samir his latest photographs, portraits of neighborhood elders, sharing traditional crafts with younger generations. "He has your gift," Samir told Farah when she joined them, "for seeing beauty in ordinary moments. He works harder than I did at his age," Farah observed, "and has better equipment." "That's the point, isn't it?" Julian said, overhearing. "To make the path easier for those who come after." That evening, after the center closed, Farah, Julian, and Samir sat in the rooftop garden they'd created above the warehouse. Solar-powered string lights illuminated potted plants tended by community members. Below, the city stretched in all directions, both the gleaming downtown towers and the neighborhoods still fighting for resources and recognition. "I've been thinking about Elena's journals," Farah said, watching the sunset paint the city gold. "How she wrote about the responsibility of privilege." Julian nodded. She believed talent created obligation, that those who succeeded had a duty to create access for others. "Like you did for me," Farah acknowledged. I opened a door, Julian corrected. You walk through it on your own merit, Samir chuckled. This is why I like him, he told Farah in Arabic. He sees you clearly. Right away. Comfortable silence fell as they watched darkness settle over the city. Farah thought about the journey of the past year, how opportunity had transformed not just her life, but her sense of what was possible. The London project, she said finally. I want to structure it differently than traditional residencies, more collaborative. Working with local photographers rather than just documenting communities myself, building capacity rather than extracting images, Julian nodded. Alina would approve. The center can manage while you're away, Samir assured her, reading her unspoken concern. Dominique is more than capable. I'll be dividing my time between here and London, Julian added. Meridian needs attention, but this project takes priority. As they discussed plans, Farah realized how thoroughly her perspective had shifted. No longer was she fighting simply to have her works, and now she was creating systems to ensure others had the same opportunity. The next morning, Farah arrived early at the center to find Tiana already there, camera in hand. I wanted to photograph the sunrise through the east windows, the girl explained. For the Perspectives project, Farah helped her set up, offering guidance on exposure settings while letting Tiana make her own creative decisions. As golden light filled the space, transforming ordinary objects into things of beauty, they were recognized the moment for what it was, the continuation of a cycle that had begun long before her. From Alina to Julian to Farah to Tiana, each opening. Doors, each passing forward the gift of being truly seen. Later, as students and community members filled the center, Farah watched Julian working with a group of seniors who were curating an exhibition of historical neighborhood photographs. His genuine engagement with their stories reflected the same quality. He'd first recognized in Farah's work respect for subjects as collaborators rather than material. Their eyes met across the room, sharing a moment of quiet understanding. The path that had brought them together had been unexpected, marked by both loss and discovery. But the result, this vibrant space where art and community intersected, felt like exactly where they were meant to be. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not completion, but continuity. As Farah picked up her own camera to document the day, she thought of what her grandfather had told her years ago about persistence and talent. Both mattered, but so did opportunity, so did recognition. So did the belief that one's vision deserved to be shared. She captured the image before her, Julian and Samir side by side, helping a young photographer frame her shot, 3 generations. Collaborating in the art of seeing, the weight of dreams remained. But now it was balanced by the knowledge that dreams, when realized, could create space for others to follow, turning full circle from aspiration to achievement to opportunity. For the next dreamer waiting to be seen,